Ultra.
Goes huge for Ultra, and they get their first home series victory.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of CDL Ultra. I'm one of your hosts, Spencer. With me is Chris. And Chris, how's it going?
You know what? I wish it could be going a little bit better, but unfortunately it's not. You know, we have a super week, so we're going to do a couple super episodes. We're going to have one. This is our first update episode. We're going to have another one after the weekends. I'm super excited for that. But, you know, first two games of the week, not quite the way we wanted it to go.
But do you know what we do want to go? We want those people who are watching this video to jump right down into that comment section and one, let us know their thoughts on how the games have went so far and how you think the games are going to go for the next two up-and-coming matches, but also, two, to smash that like button if they enjoy the content, because it really helps us out.
Smash that like button.
And if they don't,
smash that like button as hard as the Atlanta Faze and Optic Chicago smashed us.
I was going to say, yeah, I want you to hit that. I want you to hit that like button as hard as Optic hit us on that opening checkmate, because that was tough in that first hard point. But yeah, okay. With that out of the way, let's just jump right into this. As you know, we're going to preview the two matches that just happened. We're going to preview the two up and coming matches versus the LAG as well as Paris. Yeah, so I mean, those.
I wish we could preview the first two matches because they're already over.
No, well, you know what I mean. I mean, for the two matches up and coming, the two matches that haven't happened yet. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. The first two matches that have happened so far in Super Week, obviously, first was Atlanta Faze, of which Toronto goes down 3-1, and it's tough because I feel like this match overall ended on a sour note. You know what I mean? But it didn't necessarily start there. Like, so it's tough because I left this match, I think, being pretty disappointed, but it's important to remember two things. First of which, it is the Atlanta Faze, who in my opinion are the best team in the league, but also it started really well. It was actually a really competitive first two maps that Toronto, I think, put forward. It really just kind of fell apart at the end, but those first two maps especially were really competitive. Yeah,
I was going to say, for me, it was a 3-1, but it was almost a 3-2. And a 3-2 for me, even if it's a loss against the top three teams, is still pretty good on my end. Like, I'm still happy about something like that.
Well, I just mean, let's be serious here though. Our SNDs looked really good. For all you know, it could have been a 3-2 Toronto if we were able to pull that first hard point out. I mean, who knows? It does go to Moscow, and I do think Moscow maybe isn't one of our better maps, regardless of searching for a hard point. But still, you never know. Like, we actually could have potentially had an upset on our hands if we close out that first hard point raid, which was so close, going down 250 to 247. And like, I don't want to say Ultra choked it, but man, like, they were up a lot, and then to get like full 60 on that one point, and then to just kind of fall apart there at the end was like extremely disappointing.
Yeah, I know. I think one really big thing that helped Atlanta Faze win that is that they were getting a lot of scrap time.
Yeah,
like they're getting a lot of scrap time, and then like you just have one like 60 full hold. And it just swings things so hard.
And it's weird because our team's not even bad at breaking. Like, we actually had one of the higher break hard point percentages in the CDL, according to some of the stats that we've seen on Twitter. We're one of the better teams in terms of breaking those hard points. Obviously, we've just watched the Optic game. Like, our breaks actually were pretty good, right? Our holes were the parts that sort of gave us concern. But for us not to be able to even get like any sort of time scrapped, right, or like stall the time whatsoever, like it was really hard to watch. And then, I mean, I'll let you talk a little bit more because I want to go over that like final fight at the end. But I think there was a few mistakes made that I think really costed us there, because we also had final point position. Like, we actually had the point with 20 points left, and Atlanta was once again able to break us.
Yeah, and I'll let you talk on that in a sec. But I think a theme that we're going to see that's really consistent throughout these two matches is the inability to trade out. And I think there are some pretty big issues right now around really holding crossfire lanes and being able to trade out people who have been taken out. And I think that's contributed to us to a lot of times being broken ourselves.
No, I mean, I totally agree. It's one of those situations where I also think that, like, when it comes to these big moments at like late in games, I think the team kind of like freezes up a little bit. And like, this team looks their best when they're playing aggressive. And you see this in the Search and Destroy. You saw this versus Optic. You saw this versus Faze. When this team is pushing the pace and being aggressive, I think that's when we look our best. And I think that, like, in those really, really tight moments, they've sort of just froze up a little bit. And I think that's really hurt us.
Yeah. I think one thing I want you guys to really think about when it comes to aggressiveness is it not that it's not the fact that you're aggressive that makes it good. The fact that the aggressiveness gives you two things. It gives you the ability to gain map control, and it gives you the ability to dictate when engagements happen.
Yeah.
If you're a person who initiates that engagement, you're typically the person who wins because it's more of a proactive decision versus a reactive decision.
Yeah.
So I would consistently see that we would be doing well when we were aggressive in dictating those engagements, even in the maps that we lost in control on raid against Atlanta. We lost it, and I think we're a terrible control team and really need to work on that. But there were moments of glory where we were getting into that aggressive form, and we did have some good patches.
Yeah, and I don't want to say we're a terrible control team just yet. It's very clearly our weakest mode, but also we've lost to teams like Florida, Chicago, and Atlanta. So I'm really looking forward to see how our control holds up. I mean, to be fair, also Minnesota. But versus teams like Paris and the Guerrillas, which I think are like much more winnable games. So if our control looks as rough versus them, I'm gonna be like a little bit more concerned. But it's very clearly a mode we need to work on. But yeah, like this is a great position where it's like we played aggressive, we played well all map, and even though we couldn't get a break or a scrap time on that one of those final points, and it gave them the full 60, which was unfortunate, we still had that like final hold position, and the map was still within our reach. And it really comes down to like kind of an unlucky situation, but also I think a bit of a misplay by Methods where he's holding the left cross, which I think is the angle that he needs to hold, and he's doing the correct play. And it's sort of unlucky that Arcides just spawns behind. And I think it's pretty clearly called out because both Methods and Bance simultaneously like sort of turn to look at Arcides who spawns in the back. But I feel like if you're Methods in that situation, you kind of just need to hold that angle regardless, because unfortunately Methods like turns around to try to push Arcides and then ends up getting picked off by Simp, I believe. Which then again, at that situation, it's a 4v3, and it just allows Faze to set up this sort of break where they have 4 different people hitting from 4 different angles, and you have 3 people on hill only watching 3 sites. Like, the math just doesn't work out in their favor, and Atlanta Faze is able to break and sort of close at that map. And I think, like, it's not a terrible play, because I do understand, like, in the heat of the moment, like, I can understand why Methods would be like, oh, Arcides is spawning behind me, like, let me go take that. That way he doesn't get flanked. But I think with when you're at, like, 239 points, I feel like you got to know that, like, time is on your side, and even if Arcides does take the long route to flank you, you probably doesn't have enough time to go back and like reflank that side again. So like, it was a really tough call.
It's really tough.
And it's not even just that, because also it's not all on Methods too, because also when Methods dies, I feel like if you're the people on hill, like you need to like at that point realize that like Methods has like went down and then do something and like actually try to push out aggression, like somebody like Bance, for instance, to try to push out. But instead everybody just sort of sits there and watches their one angles and just sort of like allows Faze to set up and have that like push happen. So I think there was just a few mistakes from a few different individuals on that play, and like it was like really, really unfortunate.
Once again, dictating engagements. If we read the play and knew that they were setting up, because hey, look at why would they not be pushing with X number of seconds left if it wasn't for a really big final coordinated push?
Yeah.
If they really use that time to recognize what happens, be proactive, go engage and take out 1 or 2 people, and then be able to focus on just 1 or 2 choke points.
Yeah.
Then you have something that's a little bit more doable. So yeah. I totally agree with that.
And it's a tough play because again, I think actually the team as a whole played well. I think Methods definitely played well. He really had his moments. I think Kleenex started really hot too and was frying early on. It was just sort of like at the very end, like I felt like I would have liked to have seen Methods just hold that cross regardless. But even still, like even if he goes back and he does get traded and it's like whatever, it's unlucky, like split spawns happen, and that's just like an unfortunate circumstance of Call of Duty. I would have liked to have seen like the other people on hill like at least sort of react, because you're right, like at that point like you just allowed them to set up, and I think it really cost him in the end.
So just to kind of focus now, I guess on a little bit more of a lighter note, I think obviously our S&D is extremely good,
especially in raid. It was great.
Yeah, we beat 2 of the top teams fairly convincingly on S&D. I mean, against Chicago a little bit less convincingly, but Atlanta quite convincingly, and Atlanta's a good S&D team. Now, here's one thing that I think they do really well. That's playing high-level mind games with them. We see a bunch of times where they'll try a certain strategy out, like Bance single bomb carrier just going by himself, and then it kind of works out. Sometimes it doesn't, and then they just really surprise the other team with a rush or a really aggressive play that really is good at flipping the momentum in their favor and really allows them to close out these S&D rounds early on. And here's one thing though, I think that's the brain of Marquee B that we're seeing right there, because these are very well set plays that I think Marquee B has come up with. So I think it's more of, if we can give recognition to someone, I think it'd be more towards the coaching staff.
I'm not sure specifically who comes up with the S&D strategies, but it's very, I know your point is that it's very clearly a set play, and who's ever designed these set plays, I think, yeah, you're right, does deserve a lot of praise, whoever that was, whether it's the coaching staff, whether it's somebody, who's on the Ultras. Like, I'm not entirely sure who comes up with those specific strategies. It could be a combination of both, but it is very clearly a set play. I think the biggest takeaway I had from Atlanta Faze in terms of the S&D was two things. One, like, we really played with aggression, and I love to see it. Like, people were giving it to Faze, right? Kleenex was rushing through mid. Cammy was rushing through if he gets his first pick. He keeps going. Methods wasn't afraid to chow early in, like, that top position there on defense. So, like, I thought that the team played aggressive, like, extremely aggressive. And FaZe actually was able to turn it around, I think, once they matched Toronto's aggression. But I think, like, Toronto came out swinging, and I would really like to see them do that more. And the other thing I really like to see from that Atlanta Faze S&D was actually how many different people were carrying the bomb. I think this was a bit of an issue at the end of last year, where we were sort of just like, Kleenex had bomb, and they ran all their strategies through, like, Cammy had sniper, Kleenex had bomb, and it seemed like that was sort of like the only look that they really had. And I like the fact that early in the year you're seeing, like, we saw a lot of strategies where Bance was actually the one carrying the bomb. We even saw some where Methods had the bomb, which I didn't think we would see. So I like the fact that it's not just like, okay, Kleenex has bomb and, like, Methods holds the cross, this one angle. Like, they're actually really switching it up in terms of who carries it and who sort of plays that more lurking, slaying role. And I really like to see that.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really good strategy, and I enjoy it as well. And I think that it's definitely a really good bright spot that we need to think about. So let's consider there a couple of points I want to touch on, especially for Ultra overall. I think Ultra is really good at rotations.
Yeah.
I think that it's been a drilled procedure that they get down really well. Now, the one thing that we're lacking on when it comes to a relation to that is being able to follow through with those rotations and be able to hold a point for a significant amount of time.
Yeah.
So we have good rotations, which I think allows us to be first cap on points, especially when it comes to hard point. But after that, we get broken quite easily. So I feel like our slaying power just needs to increase a little bit. I mean, Abizi, it's really interesting. An interesting thought, because Abizi, I thought it played really well for Atlanta Faze, but he wasn't particularly high on the damage or KD ratio stats at the end of the game. I think what made his plays really good is that he got the right kills when it counted. He was able to break points all the time and beat out Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, I think Abizi definitely had his engagements, though. I maybe damage, but he is. I mean, Abizi is one of the fastest players in the game. Like, he's always, like, super high up there in terms of, like, his engagements per 10 minutes. But I do agree that, like, Abizi makes some insane plays. Like, you're right. Like, it's not always, like, the engagements you get in. Sometimes it's like which engagements you get in. And Abizi definitely made some really impactful plays that really, like, set the tone.
Yeah, I agree with that. He played quite well.
Yeah, and it's another interesting stat that I remember, like, I forget the guy's name on Twitter. I might put it in the description below, but he tweeted out again, like, percentages of people who of which teams have broken the most hills, and then percentages of which teams have, like, had the most hills broken. And I think Ultra was, like, at the top of both lists. And, like, I was like, oh, are we happy that Ultra's, like, a top 5 hardpoint team in terms of breaking hills, or are we worried that their opponents are in the top 3? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, whoa, what is this? And this was before they played their Optic and their Faze game. So I think since then we've seen it once again, that again, they can break the hills and they can make the plays, but this is more evident, I think, in their Optic game. But yeah, man, there's some big moments where I really want to see a big holdout of Ultra, and it just seems like every single time they're able to,
they're just
the team's able to break. And I think that part of that is their aggression, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, that, but I also think it's they're really not being able to hold their sight lines and, like, check each other. Like, there's so many times we don't
individualistic.
Yeah, they're a little bit individualistic from that standpoint. There's times when we really just don't see like that trade coming in when we
Yeah.
need that trade. You know, there's too many times we see 2 picks by guys on the other teams.
Yeah, I think
But
I think it's like if there's moments where like, okay, it's very clearly a strat that like, hey, Kleenex like enters and then someone tries to get the trade, and like in those instances, I think we're pretty good. But you're right, when it's not just a very standard setup like predetermined, okay, Kleenex is going to go, we're going to get those trades. If it's like in the mix of a fight, like it can be a bit of a struggle. But
that's
I know what you mean.
so that's the really concerning thing for me, right? Is because we're dealing with a team that have now been with each other for like their second season. They're supposed to be that team that has that innate sense or ability to be able to know what to do when things aren't as planned and things get a little more hairy. But it seems like they're more excelling at the things that are quite structured and planned. So I think that's a little bit of a concerning thing for my side.
Yeah, and I have a bit of a theory, and I'm going to mention it just like right now. It's again with this. I'm going to preface that like it's early in the season. We know that's early in the season. It's also important to note that we are basing some of these assumptions off of Toronto playing Optic and Faze, which are 2 of the 3 best teams in the game. So like I'm also really looking forward to seeing how this team plays against LAG and Paris, which I think are much objectively easier games. So it's easy to like pick and prod a team when they're going up against the best of the best, and it's sort of those, I think those mistakes like more glaring, and you can like mask those mistakes more when you're just like up against a better team and able to like outskill opponents like Paris and LAG. Although I don't think those are easy games, but they should be easier games. But it's like a point I'm going to bring up nonetheless, because at the end of the day, like if you want to win a championship, I think there's holes you got to fix. And I think it's because like Vance and Cammy seem to sort of like want to play similar roles, and then that like leads to like the individualisticness of it, where it's like I kind of feel like they both really enjoy that like that flex role and that like slay heavy role, and I feel like the only person who can really like hit hills and just like play that like speed sort of like baity kind of play style is Kleenex. And it's a little bit like I feel like if this team's going to see more sustained success in the future, they're going to have to be able to mix up the looks that they give in Respawn too, because I feel like the only person right now who can like consistently just slide it in and like take that first engagement is Kleenex. And I would like to see it where like Bance or Cammy can also do that. Like I don't mind Kleenex being like that's his main role, because again like he excels in that, but I do think it's important to start to see more looks from people like Cammy and Bance, because right now there's definitely moments where it seems like both of them are trying to play a slower flex style of gameplay. Like I look at like some moments are in Faze and like Banch has like the lowest engagements on the map, even though he's like playing a submachine gun role, right? Whereas like Simp and Abizi are like very clearly both being able to play those sorts of roles. So I hope that's something that we can improve upon in the future. But with that being said, it is again like against 2 of the 3 best teams in the league, so it's not a huge deal, but it's something that I've noticed, and we'll see if they improve upon it moving forward.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, enough of that. Let's move on to the preview of these next 2 games, Paris and LAG. What team do you think Toronto is going to do better against?
I mean, I actually have no idea. My initial thing would have easily been Paris, because I think they looked worse in week 1. Like very clearly they looked worse in week 1. Actually, LAG beat them, but it was close. But I mean, Paris just came out and 3-0'd Florida, so I have absolutely no idea. Paris going into it, I thought was the better team. So like my instincts are like, okay, maybe Paris just had a rough week. Like this happens. Like same with like the Empire, for instance. So my initial thought would be, okay, LAG is probably the easier matchup, but both teams have actually looked surprisingly good. I think it's just a testament to the amount of skill that's in this league, that there are no easy matchups. There's easier matchups, but I don't think there's an easy matchup here. So any given Sunday, any team can win. I think an easier matchup is going to be LAG though.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting to note that I was looking at how some of these teams have performed, and it seems like these 2 teams are also teams that are better at S&D or hardpoint, and to a lesser extent S&D. So it's going to be interesting, because I feel like Toronto is going to have a little bit of a tougher time in the S&T and hardpoint areas, but it may actually look for its first pickup in control. So yeah. I'm looking forward to the time when we do pick up a win in control, and I think these 2 teams are good opportunities to do that, because it seems like they're quite weak in control.
Yeah, and I think like these are 2 games that Ultra can go out there and win 3-0. Like I don't think you'll do that with both teams, because again, teams are so talented, but I would like to see one dominant performance. Like we beat Florida, it wasn't dominant, but it was a good win, right? I wouldn't say that it was like a really close game. Like the Optic game, for instance, right? Like those were really close. That was a really close hard point. That was a really close control. We got absolutely smacked on checkmate, which again, I don't know why we play checkmate 0.1 versus Optic. We didn't really talk too much about the Optic, but like personally, I wouldn't want to play that team. So if you're a fan and you're a little worried about how bad Ultra looked versus Optic on checkmate, like the person, my opponent would be like, that's kind of okay. It's concerning, but at the same time, that's like Optic's best map. And to be frank, I thought it was going to be our worst. So I'm surprised that we actually saw them play it at all. But I would really like to see at least one of these be like, okay, Ultra just like 3-0s them easy. Like just absolutely, not absolutely slaps one of them teams, but I would like to see a dominant performance out of one of them. And then maybe like a closer 3-1 out of the other one. Because I do think like both these teams are capable of putting up a fight. But I also think Ultra's capable of putting up a dominant performance. So,
and I think that will solidify us as a mid-table team at least.
Oh, and no, if we go out there and we win
that.
like 3-0, 3-1, this is very clearly a upper echelon team. Like we're down on them a little bit right now because we've seen them, I guess, like look really shady at points versus Optic and Faze. But like, let's not kid ourselves. It's Optic and Faze. Nobody went into this year saying, man, Ultra could be better than Optic and Faze. We didn't say that, and we're like, if anyone's going to let their bias get the best of them, it would be us. You know what I mean? Like, I had them at 6, and that's one of the highest I've seen anybody put them. So I think they're still capable of reaching that 6-5 position. And I'm a little down on them, but just because we've seen them play arguably the two best teams in the game. So I'm really looking forward to reevaluating this team's performance once I get to see them play Paris and LAG, which I think should give us a more accurate representation of where their ceiling is.
Yeah, exactly. And I know we didn't see Dallas struggle, so I mean, I don't even know.
Yeah, they beat London 3-2. That was a close 3-2 versus London. So I don't know. I mean, even like LA Thieves, right, who I would have said them would overtake it. They almost lost versus Seattle. I mean, they obviously slapped them at the end there, but there's been some close matchups. There's been some teams. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. There's no bad teams in this league, right? You can argue who's 12th, who's 11th, who's 10th, and somebody's got to be 12th. But I don't think there is a very clear bottom-dwelling relegation team, you know, if you want to go like a soccer reference. There's no team that I would be like, they would go into the amateur tournaments and lose. Like, these are all really, really talented teams. So I think any given team can show up on any given night and get a W. But hopefully these next 2 nights, you know, Ultra ends up getting the win versus both of them. And I think they should. I would have it 3-0 versus Paris, or sorry, 3-0 versus LAG and 3-1 versus Paris.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that as well. I'm going to say the exact same thing. And I think that's all from us today. So, hey, thanks for listening, guys. If you have your own thoughts that are different from ours, same from ours, once again, feel free to share them. I want to know exactly what you guys are thinking. If not, like it at least, or else I'll find you. I'll find you on the internet. But other than that, you know, look forward to our next video. We're going to have another recap of the next 2 games towards the end of this week / next week.
Yep. Awesome, guys. And as always, thank you for watching and enjoy.